What's up, everybody? Got a 2014 Kia Optima. Give you the specifics on the model here. And this is the SX TGDI. Somebody in the comments can tell me what that stands for. Well, it's a Kia Optima SX TGDI. Whatever that stands for, like I said. So we are going to replace the wheel bearings and the rear brakes. I already started taking the caliper off of this side. I got the wheels off of it. This thing is riding on some pretty big wheels on some rubber bands here. It's 22-inch wheel on this car. And we'll find a tire size for y'all to look at on the video here. Where you at, tire size? Where you at? Right there. Rolling on 225/30 ZR22s. Little thin little rubber band. Riding on these big old 22s now. What kind of rim is this? What's that say? Caballo. Caballo, it looks like it's caballo means horse in Spanish. I don't know. Could be some Spanish rims. Anyways, so we got some caballo 22-inch rims, 225, 35, 22 on this Kia. And they fit snug in there, but according to the owner, they don't rub. So he brought it to me to do the rear wheel bearings and the front and back brakes. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. This is just gonna be a quick assessment of what's being done, right? So we got it jacked up on jack stands. I always leave a jack under it just for peace of mind. Where did I jack the rear end from? For those of you that aren't sure where to jack the rear end, off of the rear subframe where the control arm attaches to right there, that metal piece. Jack that up. First, I jacked the front end up. And last but not least, I jacked the rear end up, the front end. You want to support from the jack mounts. That's where I put the jack stand. There's a 6-ton jack stand. And then to lift it on the front end, because it has this big plastic cover, you don't want to lift anywhere from the front end. But you see the marks where I have the jack on this piece of metal where this control arm bushing goes to. You can really lift off of this back one too if you wanted to, but it's too far back. So you're gonna come from the front and you're gonna grab with a low profile jack this bushing to the control arm. Get it on the metal there, jack it up from one side there, place your jack stand right there, and then you're gonna repeat, jack up the other side from the same place and do that also. The front brakes on this still had a little bit of life in them, but you know, we were doing the rear, so might as well do the front also. I haven't taken anything apart on this wheel, but we'll take these hub adapters off and set them there. So this is what it looks like in the front without taking it apart. The front is pretty self-explanatory. I'll show you that. On this side, I already have it tore apart. So you got your 2 caliper bolts, which are, I want to say they were 14s. Yeah, 14s. And I just used the 14 wrench. And then you had your caliper bracket bolts, which were 17s. And the caliper itself were 14. So a 14 and a 17 there. I used the flathead to pry in between and give myself a little bit of release in between the pads. I use a thick screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, and a hammer to get the little bolts out that hold the rotor, and they bolt in here and here to hold the rotor in. This is oxidized, so we'll spray this down, put a little bit of anti-seize lubricant on that. Your caliper bracket will go there. This wheel bearing in the front is a press-on wheel bearing. Take the axle nut out, pop the hub out after the axle's out, unbolt it, and it's a press-on bearing. So he doesn't need those. He needed the rear. I guess they were humming or making noise or whatever. So we'll put a new rotor on this, new pads, put it back together, and we're done with the front. These are the rotors we're going to be putting on them, cross-drilled, slotted rotors. The two you're looking at here are for the front, and those two are for the rear. Here's your pads for the front with hardware and anti-seize lubricant. Those are the rear, that's the front. There's our wheel bearings. And this is all from Detroit Axle on eBay. I've ordered a lot from them in the past. They got good quality stuff. Nothing you're gonna regret buying. Here's your hubs for the rear with the 4 bolts. Now normally these would be marked a left or a right, driver, passenger. You do have a date. I don't think y'all can see that, too much camera glare. (4/12/20) is when these were made, and there's your part number, I guess. K512437. K512437. This one was manufactured 11/09/19. So you know the day that this part was made. They stamp it. The other thing you know is that they both have the same part number, so it shouldn't matter which one goes on left or right. Like I said, there's the new rotors. You'll have a new surface for the emergency brake shoes to ride in here. You'll have the new wheel bearing. These are ABS equipped. You have your ABS on the rear. Let me show you what's going on with doing the rears. The rear require a little more work, and I honestly shot myself in the foot. I didn't realize they were going to require so much work, but apparently I spoke too soon, and now I'm being underpaid on how much work it's going to take to do this, but it is what it is. Always want to check the sliders and make sure that they're free and moving. If not, re-lubricate them. This is the problem that you're going to have here. Try to get a good angle. So you see this? This is the slider that holds the caliper. That's the other slider that holds the caliper. Your inner brake pad goes there. The caliper comes up over. So this 12mm bolt right here will release the caliper bracket, and you have to remove that in order to remove the rotor. The other 12mm bolt that holds the bottom side of the caliper bracket is buried inside this spindle, whatever you want to call it. See it down in there? And if you try to get a wrench or something in there, you're going to end up stripping it. So you end up having to remove this tow rod right here that goes back yonder. So you don't remove the whole arm. You just knock this nut off and then knock the bolt out this way. But when you knock this bolt out this way, it's going to come out this way, right? The head of this bolt, after that nut comes off, is going to hit this shock, strut, whatever you want to call it. There's a shock. It's not a strut. So it's going to hit the shock here. So now you're in a predicament because the bolt won't push all the way out to release for this tow rod tie rod to drop down, and you're like, now I got to release that nut down there for the shock, and then it has the other nut right here on the opposite end right here. So that's the bolt side, this is the nut side. So you're going to release that nut and then knock that through, and then that'll push this shock back enough for this nut to slide out this way, this tow rod to push down, and then you can get to that bolt down there. Then on top of that, you have to take the wheel bearing out, which the bolts are hiding in here, and you could barely even see them. See, there's one down there, two down there. Those are the two bottoms. Here's the one on top, and the other one on top is hiding in there. So all that has to come off. Obviously, like I said, you want to remove your Phillips there. You have two of them there and there. Don't strip them out. Big rookie mistake. A lot of people strip these out. You want to put your big Phillips on there and hit it with a hammer. Boom, boom. Every time you hit it straight dead on. That sends a shock through the threads of the nut and starts to shock it to break it loose. You don't want to hit it crooked or slanted. You want to be very accurate in having it dead straight. Hit it a couple times and then you'll be able to knock it loose. If you're doing it by yourself and you don't have nobody to hold it from moving, what I do is just put my knee in between the lug nuts there and put pressure on it there, put the tool there and hit it, clack, 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 clack. So I'm kind of holding it with my knee. Then you unscrew them, hit the rotor to knock it loose, pop that off, and then you'll have everything taken apart that I'm about to show you over here. I wanted to show you in the video what it looks like before I took it apart. And this is what it looks like completely taken apart already. There you go. So we're ready to install the new wheel bearing on this side. And these are the bolts that come in from the back side. And I believe those were 12s. Yeah, those are 12 millimeters. So what I did was I used this deep 12 to get these two on the back side. And then these two on this side, the shock's in the way. So I switched to a short 12 with a 3/8 extension. This extension has a little bit of a flex head for a little bit of a wobble. And I had a shorter one because I was just checking for lengths, but I ended up using the longer one. And so that's about the size extension you're going to want to use. You're going to want that little bit of flex in it, and then your short 12 on there. Really, I could have probably used the long 12. The other nuts were 19s, so I used 3/4. It's the same thing. The 12 millimeter wrench, and this was a 21 millimeter that I just used to interlock the wrenches with for extra leverage to help crack them loose. So here's your old wheel bearing. And that's where we're gonna bolt the new one. I'm gonna try to show you the back side of this where I had it taken apart, the shock. Let me see if I can hold the phone with the other hand. So you see the bolt down there that I pushed all the way out. So that's where you can see where I knocked that out. And then over here you can see where I had to knock this tow rod out to have access to the bolt that goes in on the bottom of that caliper bracket. So this is your caliper bracket here and here, there and there. And then you have your 4 bolts for the wheel bearing. Looks a lot easier on video, but there's very little room back here. So this Let's see if I can get this back on. Alright, so I'm gonna go with the long 12 just to test that it would work too. Okay, so that's there. And then it's gonna come out back here and you're gonna grab it from back there with your ratchet. And the same with the other one. On the bottom there. And then you'll grab that one from back there also. So that's how that'll go. And then the other one on this side, you don't need the extension. And I'm just using a long flex head 3/8 ratchet, Pittsburgh Harbor Freight ratchet. I love those things. You break them and then you go back and just get new ones. I'm using this off of my air hammer to knock the bolts through, hitting them dead in the center to not damage the outer threads, and push both of those through, and there's the nuts for them. So the other thing I wanted to show you guys here is how this mounts up, and I'll have to kind of set the phone down for a second just to set it in place. If y'all will bear with me here. I'm one-handing this with the camera, so just be patient, grasshopper. I'll be back on the camera in a second. Okay, so there you go. I got the dust shield on there, and then the wheel bearing would pretty much mount in through there, and there's the bolts where they actually thread onto the wheel bearing into here. So what I wanted to show you guys is this. For those of you that haven't seen this taken apart on your Kia, this is like a shoe, like a brake shoe, but it's not for braking. It's only for your emergency brake. And so if your emergency brake is feeling like it has a lot of slack, it's because you have an adjustment down here for it. And so you turn this either up or down. I'm not going to turn it now because it's barely held in and it'll fall if I try to turn it. But once I have this bolted back in, I'll turn here and that'll push these shoes out tighter up against the inside. Up against the inside of the rotor. This has like a dual purpose. This is like a drum, and then this is the disc for the rear disc for stopping. So the brake pad clamps here and the emergency brake clamps in here inside of there. So when you go to put this on excuse me, when you go to put this on, you want to not only adjust that but also clean this. You don't want the brake dust on there. At some point he's gonna have to replace these, but there's enough meat on them, and it's only for the emergency brake, and there's enough meat on there still. You can see the meat there. So there's enough meat on there to where we can just do a clean and adjust on the rear brake shoes. Later down the road we'll end up having to replace these, and they're similar to like replacing drums, where the top is held in by this spring up here. This acts like a rear brake cylinder. That's what the e-brake mechanism is attached to. And then you have another spring on the bottom, and then you have your two clips for the shoes and your adjuster on the bottom. All this is dirty, so we're gonna clean all that, make it look nice, right? You're either gonna work on it, make it look like you worked on it, like you cared, or don't do it at all. So we'll get all that cleaned up first before we put the wheel bearing on. We don't like to put new parts on top of dirty parts. We'll clean this, we'll put the wheel bearing on, we'll bolt it down, we'll do the adjustment, everything will be clean, we'll put that new rotor on, we'll bolt it on, then we'll go to the caliper would go on next. But before I move on to the caliper, I would want to come back over here and make sure that I attach my strut, my shock, strut, whatever you want to call it. This is a shock. I keep wanting to call it a strut, but there's no coil spring on it, so it's a shock. The spring is separate. Anyways, you'll want to go back and bolt that first, and then you want to bolt this tow rod after the caliper is installed, because the caliper bracket would have to go first, and then you could put that on, and then last but not least you would put the caliper, which I have tucked up under there just so that the weight of the caliper isn't pulling on the brake line. It's tucked in there. So yeah, I think that's pretty much a decent explanation to give you a visual understanding of what it would take to do this job. It's not really like you need a whole bunch of fancy tools. I've been doing this for a long time, have a lot of experience, so it really doesn't faze me. It sounds very simple to me. I could totally understand how someone that has never done this before could be a little bit intimidated by this job. There we go. Set that back down. You see what I mean by your emergency brake cable attaches there. So we'll clean this real nice. And another thing you want to inspect while you're here is your rear ABS sensor, which bolts in with a 10mm bolt there. You always want to look at the wires and make sure they're not damaged in any way, any breaks or kinks in them. So we'll spray that down and clean it up too. And on the inside, there's the inside of that ABS sensor. And as it goes and it spins inside of this hub, you see the photocentric, it'll pick up in between all the little black lines, and that's where it'll pulsate and grab and understand that it needs to lock the ABS in. The sensor sends the signal. I'm not going to turn this into educating you on how ABS system works, but you just want to make sure that that's clean. That's all you really need to know. And you want to inspect this on the new one and make sure that it's good also. I don't put any lube or anything crazy like that in here because, like I said, you want it to be clean. I just bolt it in, make sure everything's clean. So yeah, that'll be the wheel bearing. That's pretty much what you're gonna do. I'm gonna wipe as much of this down as I can. It's pretty dirty, so we'll spray it down. That's why I have my pan here. What I use to clean is brake parts cleaner from O'Reilly's. So we'll spray all this down, get it nice and clean, put the wheel bearing on, like I said, everything clean, adjust, reinstall. I don't want to bore y'all with the video too much, so I think I've pretty much given you an idea for anyone that's considering, hey, is that something that I can do myself, or should I get help, or what's the situation? That gives you an idea. Here's the turbo on the back of this model, and you can tell nobody's been under this hood in a while. Not just because of the leaves and everything, but the dust. I mean, nobody's been under here for anything. And look, this is the coolant overflow tank. And right here you have your low mark and your full mark. And this thing is like empty. Hyundai uses that green coolant. So there's barely anything in there. You don't want it below low and you don't want it above full. You want to leave this gap from this full line to the top empty, because when the radiator is overpressurized and needs to empty itself, it will empty itself back into the system here. So it needs that space to be able to empty itself. But it also needs to stay at full because, again, when the radiator needs to replenish itself, it'll ask from here and it'll take back into the radiator, so it needs to have enough to be able to take back what it needs to take back. So it's important to keep it exactly at the full mark. I'll check all his other fluids, you know, check his belt. Belt seems to have a little bit of wear on it. Check his oil, check his air filter, wipe all his down, make it look nice. The brake pads, last thing I want to mention, if you're doing this, a lot of times these brake pads will come brand new in the box like that, and you'll put them on, and it's two surfaces that are meeting each other for the first time. Especially with the slotted drill rotors, you want to kind of scuff this up a little bit. I believe this is a premium ceramic disc. So you want to kind of scuff this up a little bit to avoid any squealing. You'll have like brand new brakes and they'll be squealing. So what I do is I take them, like Karate Kid, Danielson, wax on, wax off. Phone is horrible at auto-focusing. Now, I'm not trying to kill the brake pad. I'm just trying to scuff it up a little bit. Help break it in. It's like when you got a brand new pair of boots and they're like brand new leather pair of boots and they're nice and stiff, right? See that? I'm scuffing it up real good. And then after you wear them for a while, they're nice and broken and they feel like a pair of tennis shoes. But at first, they're real rough, right? So I scuff them up like that, and obviously I spray brake cleaner on this afterwards to get the dust off of it. But I always rub the brake pads down and scuff them up a little bit. It's a little old school mechanic trick to keep them from squeaking. It just helps the two surfaces mate and marry together instead of not being scuffed up at all and just forcing them to bite and grab. Obviously hardware kit, grease, like I mentioned, do that to all the brake pads and go from there. I like these rotors. They seem like quality stuff. Detroit Axle, like I said, I have no complaints about them. They always make quality stuff. I'll end this video saying the brake job on the front, not a big deal. Almost anybody can do that. Even if you don't do it technically the textbook way, the way they would teach you to do it in mechanic school, no big deal. You'll get it done. You'll be on the road. Doesn't take a certified mechanic or anything to do that. The wheel bearings, or even just the rear brakes, replacing the rotors, having to remove the calipers, having to free up that strut, that shock, again, calling it a strut, having to remove the rear shock from the bottom, having to remove that tow rod. Sometimes getting that stuff to come off is easy. Getting it to go back is another. You got to use the jack, kind of help line things up. You want to lube those bolts, lubricate them properly before you try to force them back in there. Things don't always line up as easy as you think they're going to line up. So you got to know how to have patience and being able to manipulate and line things up correctly without damaging the threads on the bolt. If you think you're up for that, then go for it and try to do it yourself. If not, I highly recommend you get at least a B-level technician to help you with this job. This isn't something that requires a A-level master certified technician. You can be a decent B-level technician and handle this rear wheel bearing, rear brakes on these Kia Optima 2014s. No sweat. A C-level technician, which is the lowest level technician, like someone that just can do oil changes and really basic stuff, changes air filter, install a radio, but he really doesn't get into any kind of mechanic stuff. That's a C-level technician. B-level technician, he does the average mechanic stuff, but he's not going to get into anything a A-level master certified technician would do. So A level, highest, B level, mid-grade, C level, entry level. C level technician by himself, I don't recommend you do this rear caliper brake removal on these Kia Optimas. Get a B technician buddy or somebody that you know that help you, pay them, do whatever you got to do. You might end up in a situation that you thought you could handle, and then you're all stressed out with your car taken apart, struggling to get things to line up and put it back together. That would be my advice. I got to get to work, finish this thing up. Late night over here working. Thanks for watching. I may or may not do another video once it's all put back together. To me, this is kind of like everyday boring stuff. If you have a question, just drop a comment below letting me know. Danny, great info, but I have a question about this. Hope this was useful to you. Kind of share the knowledge a little bit, and at the same time document what I'm doing here. Sometimes the customer is not there to see you do the job, and they're like, well, he said he replaced that, but how do I know if he really replaced the wheel bearings? Well, you see it taken apart. I do pictures and all that kind of stuff too on top of the video, just for the customer to have a record and proof of what was done. But at the same time, hopefully somebody that's thinking, I've never done a 2014 Kia Optima. Like, I personally wouldn't have known that you have to remove the strut and the shock and all that. So I priced this like if it was just a simple brake job like the front where you just remove the caliper and that's it. I didn't price it for all the extra time of having to remove the shock and the tow rod and everything just to be able to get the caliper and the wheel bearing off. So should have asked for a little more on this job. So hopefully somebody else watching this video gets an idea of what to price the job at after watching this. I'm gonna let y'all go. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.